Morning. Gracias por acompañarnos en una nueva sesión de Sitges Fan Lab. Este es un encarter con Kier-La Janisse. Para aquellos que no conozcáis a Kier-La, es una de las grandes dentro del cine fantástico, no solo por su labor como historiadora, crítica, directora de documentales, responsable y cofundadora del Miskatonic Horror Studies. Su trayectoria es extensísima, pasando desde festivales de cine, como os decía, la parte académica, pero quizás es más que conocida por esta obra que tengo entre mis manos, The House of Psychotic Woman, que cumple 10 años y aparece con una nueva edición. Entonces, hoy nos centraremos un poquito más en este nuevo bebé que ha alumbrado a la familia del terror y que es una visión increíble de la neurosis femenina a través del cine. Pero mejor nos lo cuenta ella. Hi, Kier-La. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
La primera pregunta es obvia, saber cuál era tu objetivo cuando escribiste por primera vez House of Psychotic Woman. You want to translate?
Yes, sorry. What was your aim? When you had
The first edition of
the first edition of this book?
Well, I think when I first was planning it, I did not plan for it to be autobiographical at all. Like the book, for people who don't know, the book it's like a memoir with film that's interspersed with film analysis. So there's like personal stories from my life mixed in with film analysis, looking at the history of depictions of female emotional disturbances and mental illness in film, in horror film specifically. And so when I first was thinking of it, I was just going to do like a book of essays, you know, so just like focusing on 10 or 15 different films. And then when you know, it took me a really long time to write it, and so as I was working on it, oh, sorry, I got to be slower. Because you translate. Okay, go ahead.
No problem. La verdad es que realmente cuando tuve mi primera idea estaba planeando este libro, no tenía la misma intención de hacer algo personal, de hacer algo que hablara sobre algo autobiográfico, sino hacer una introspectiva sobre las películas, un análisis películas donde se describían mujeres con problemas mentales, y hacer un libro sobre unas 10, 15 redacciones de diferentes películas, y me estaba costando mucho trabajo escribir este libro. La idea inicial no era algo autobiográfico.
But why this topic? Why the female neurosis? ¿Por qué este tema? ¿Por qué las enfermedades mentales femeninas?
I mean, a friend of mine pointed out to me that I was always very drawn to these films. He's like, every movie you like has a crazy woman in it, you know? And I started trying to look into that and explore that and try to figure out why. And I realized that so much of it was personal to me, that it was like that was how I saw myself. Those are characters I relate to. But also the women in my life growing up, my mom and my sister, also had some of these types of problems, and so it was just something that was very personal to me. So.
La verdad es que una amiga mía me señaló el hecho de que las películas que veía o me atraían, siempre salían en todas las películas alguna crazy woman, alguna mujer inestable, y me di cuenta de que realmente era algo personal conmigo, que identificaba de alguna manera estos personajes con mi vida. Muchas mujeres en mi vida también han tenido problemas, como mi madre o mi hermana, y vi una relación de observar, sentirme atraída con este tipo de películas a mi vida personal. En mi vida personal.
Pero aquí hay una unión de dos caminos, que por un lado es la neurosis femenina con el terror. ¿Es este el género que retrata de forma más fiel la neurosis, o este camino que tú estabas buscando de explicar a través del cine los problemas mentales de las mujeres?
There is a union between two ways, two roads in this the neurotic genre in these films, and el camino de...
Yeah, you mix the horror and the female neurosis. Why horror? Is the genre the best tool to show this kind of insanity in women?
Well, I think that horror is, as I was mentioning to you earlier, I think that because horror films are always a very exaggerated version of reality, and so everything is very extreme. The emotions are very heightened, and you can go into some very, very dark and dangerous places emotionally with horror that you can't as much in a film where things have to stay rooted in reality. So I do think that horror is a great place to explore all these kinds of emotions.
Sí, pienso que las películas de terror exageran estas versiones de la realidad, las emociones son extremas, tú puedes ir a lugares muy oscuros emocionalmente y es como un gran lugar, es algo catártico, es como un gran lugar para experimentar o para adentrarte en estas sensaciones.
¿Podrías decirme como tu ranking de películas a través de las cuales tú dices, vale, estas son las películas capitales para entender el terror y para entender este vínculo con la neurosis femenina?
Could you tell us the most important, the top 5 of 10 ranking of movies to understand the female neurotic in this kind of films?
Well, I think there's a few different kinds of films. Among my favorites of everything covered in the book are things like these 3 films that I feel very much go together, which is Possession, The Brood, and Antichrist. And I feel as though, because those films are dealing with some very dangerous emotions, especially dealing with motherhood and dealing with just feelings of, it's hard to explain, just like generational trauma being passed down and a rejection of motherhood, and they just are very dark and disturbing films emotionally, not just viscerally, but emotionally very disturbing films. So that's one type of film, films dealing with kind of like extreme manifestations of hysteria. I really like films like that.
Bueno, hay diferentes tipos de películas. Hay 3 que me gustan mucho. Una es Possession, la otra Antichrist, and I'm sorry I don't understand the second one. Bros.
The Brood.
The Brood. No sé qué película, no la conozco. Vale. Lo siento. Entonces, todas estas películas tratan sobre emociones personales como la maternidad. Es difícil de explicar, pero me llama la atención las películas que tratan sobre los dramas generacionales que van traspasando de una generación a otra, todo lo oscuro, las emociones extremas. Son películas no tanto ya viscerales o aparte de lo visceral, sino más emocionales. Son manifestaciones extremas de la histeria.
Antes has dicho que tu intención al escribir el libro era no hacer un relato autobiográfico, pero en Canadá, cuando presentaste la nueva edición, precisamente explicabas cómo habías llegado a la estructura de explicar tus propias neurosis a través de las películas que tú veías. O sea, que finalmente tenía una estructura, un modelo que se basaba en la experiencia propia.
Your intention was not to do a biographical book, but when you introduced the book in Canada, you explained how your personal experience was so related with these movies.
How do you find this structure to explain your own stories through these movies and the time that you have watched it, the time you were in the premiere, and to reflect your own personal traumas during the journey of the book?
Well, I knew that when I was gonna, when I decided to write it personally, I knew that I had to be quite candid in my comparisons and things because I couldn't say, I relate to these characters and not explain why. I had to explain how and why, and so that required me to talk a lot about really personal things from my life. And so I tell stories from my life, and then I analyze films that have similar issues, to whatever I was experiencing at that time. And by analyzing the film, it's like an analysis of myself, And so it's almost like psychoanalysis through the films for myself, And I think that having that distance, the films in between, it creates this very useful filter to be able to look at your own personality, your own problems, your own behavior, to see it from a distance, to be able to analyze it. Having the films helps.
Sabía cuando decidí que iba a escribirlo de una forma personal que tenía que ser bastante cándida en la comparación, porque si me iba a comparar con personajes de la película tenía que explicar el cómo, el por qué. Le quería explicar cosas sobre mí muy personales. No puedo decir, me relaciono con este personaje sin explicar más profundamente. Entonces, al contar las historias, hacía un análisis de la película y también a la vez hacía un análisis de mi vida. Funcionaba un poco como si fuera un psicoanálisis y además encuentro que la distancia que se crea al ver una película y compararlo, relacionarlo con tu vida es muy útil, es un filtro muy útil para observar tus problemas personales desde una distancia y ya está.
Al margen de tus películas favoritas, ¿cuál es, ya que lo has mencionado, tu personaje favorito? ¿Con cuál te identificas más?
Besides your favorite movies, which one is your favorite character, lead role, or?
I really love Sissy in the movie The Mafu Cage. So The Mafu Cage is one of my favorite of these films. It's kind of a perfect film because it's like the character played by Carol Kane is just a wild woman, but incredibly beautiful and sensual.
Just like you.
But thank you. But she's like just like a wild creature, But also the production design of the movie is so beautiful. I mean, it's full of like plants and paintings and artifacts, and I mean, it's just like a totally gorgeous film in every way. But her character, I would say, is one of my favorites.
Me gusta mucho Sissy. El título de la película, lo siento mucho, es
Mafu Cage, de Mafu Cage, la jaula Mafu.
Vale, perdón, lo siento. Es perfecta esta película, la protagonista Carol King es un personaje femenino salvaje, es muy guapa, es muy sensual y ella ha comentado que como
Era una broma.
Ah, bueno, perdón.
No, porque también, pobre.
Es una criatura salvaje en esta película y no solo es su personaje femenino, también el diseño de producción me parece increíble, es muy bonito, tiene una belleza, las pinturas que aparecen, el set, es muy, muy bello esta película.
Perfecto. ¿Qué podemos encontrar en esta siguiente edición? 10 años después, ¿el psicoanálisis sigue?
What can we find in this new extended version 10 years after the first edition?
Well, I added 100 more movies, so there's 100 more films covered, and many more directed by women. So the first book, most of the films are directed by men, but in the last 10 years, there have been so many more films of all kinds directed by women, but especially horror films and these types of horror films. So there's a lot more films by women in the book now. There's also way more color posters and photographs and a new preface at the beginning. So, so there's a lot more material.
Hay muchísimo más material, ha añadido más de 100 películas y además muchas de ellas están dirigidas por mujeres y sobre todo tipo de películas, sobre todo de terror. Cuando hizo la primera edición, muchas de las películas que explicaba eran sobre directores masculinos, pero en esta nueva edición hay muchas más sobre mujeres. También hay una gran colección de pósters en color y dibujos y una introducción también que añade. Tiene mucho más material.
Ya que has hablado de esta diferencia entre películas dirigidas por hombres y las dirigidas por mujeres, ¿hay realmente una diferencia? O sea, ¿se expone el trauma mental femenino desde una perspectiva diferente en el caso de una película dirigida por hombre o mujer?
You talk about the difference between men directing movies and women. Do you think there is a different standpoint or perspective when talking about mental trauma, if the woman is the director or the man?
I think there is a difference, mostly in the sense that with men writing and directing the characters, often they're imagining they're imagining the perspective of the woman. And in some cases, like in the case of a movie like Possession, it's not even really Anna's story, it's her husband. It's her husband is investigating what is wrong with his wife. And so really even though most women who watch the film love her character and she is the character that stands out for women watching it, the narrative is really from the man's point of view. And so I feel like with women directing these types of films, you get much more of a pure sense of a first-person experience being explored in the films, where it's not about someone witnessing this behavior, but they have experience with it themselves.
Yo creo que la principal diferencia cuando se trata de rodar, sea un hombre director o una mujer, es que los hombres normalmente utilizan la imaginación, se imaginan la perspectiva de la mujer. Y, por ejemplo, en la película Possession, es el marido el que está investigando todo lo que sucede, le da como el protagonismo, cuando realmente la mujer tiene un papel muy importante y cuando una mujer ve la película se fija en la mujer. Entonces la narrativa es mucho más importante en el sentido de una experiencia pura, si lo narra una mujer, que no como un testigo de algo que se puede imaginar que está sintiendo o ocurriendo.
Con una perspectiva histórica de la producción alrededor de la psicosis femenina, ¿qué temas son los más frecuentes? Antes hablabas del rechazo de la maternidad, pero no sé, me pregunto, por ejemplo, la transformación del cuerpo, la menstruación.
Vale. In a historic perspective of the subjects or topics dealing with women in movies, you talk about the rejections of motherhood or body transformation, or
Which are the main topics normally? It's the rejection of motherhood, maybe the body horror.
Yeah, so I would say definitely a rejection or a questioning of motherhood is a big one. Sibling rivalry, like relationships between sisters, and identity. Often like sibling type of relationships in these films, you'll get a questioning of identity. And with best friends, you'll have like sibling movies and best friend movies, and they'll often be about weird interchangeable identities between the characters. You have like female adolescence, so women coming of age and discovering their own powers and their bodies changing, and how all of the messy emotions they don't understand come out in violent ways. There's there's like the woman alone in a house, you know, like some of them it's just one woman and it's inside her head, the whole thing, you know. And I think those ones might be my favorites, you know, where it's just you by yourself, you know, going crazy.
That's useful.
Yeah, so, yeah, there's many different kinds.
Sí, diría que sí, realmente el rechazo de la maternidad o cuestionar la maternidad es uno de los temas más importantes, pero también existen muchas, el tema de los hermanos, de la rivalidad entre hermanas o entre hermanos en cuanto a identidad, también con las mejores amigas, el intercambio extraño que se hace de querer ser de identidad de una o la otra entre personajes, también en lo referente al coming of age, la edad preadolescente o adolescente, los problemas, el cacao que uno tiene de emociones, que tu cuerpo se está transformando. Y a veces sale de formas violentas, y también el hecho de estar en una casa sola y volverte un poco loca es uno de mis temas favoritos cuando veo una película.
Y ahora, siendo un poco corporativa y con el tema de Woman in Fan, antes has mencionado Anticristo, Posesión, pero cítame 3 películas dirigidas por mujeres.
Okay, being a bit corporative with the topic of Woman in Fan, could you please tell me 3 of your favorite movies directed by women?
Besides Mafokage.
Well, definitely Always Shine is a movie that was added to the new edition that I really love. And that is, I mean, it is written by a man, though. It's written by her husband, I think. But it's like 2 women who go to, you know, they're like 2 friends who are rivals. You know, they're supposedly good friends, but they're actually both actresses, and they are competing for roles, you know, and competing for attention. And so they have all this resentment, you know, and they go to a cabin alone in the country, and then all the resentment, you know, just comes to the surface. And it's actually very similar to the movie Queen of Earth that came out Queen of Earth came out earlier, but I think Always Shine was being made first, and they just didn't have as much money or whatever, and so the movie didn't come out as early. But they are both similar, but Queen of Earth is directed by a man, and Always Shine is directed by a woman. And I feel like the relationship between the 2 women in Always Shine is a much more vicious and stronger version of that relationship than, I mean, I love Queen of Earth also, but Always Shine, definitely one of my favorites. Let's see. I really loved The Stylist, the Jill Gevarzigian's feature film adaptation of her short film, The Stylist, which is about a woman who you know, is a hairdresser, and she's very comfortable with the kinds of superficial relationships that you have with a client, but she has attachment issues, and I related to her character a lot because she has severe attachment issues, and so if she starts to have a real relationship or a real friend, she clings too tightly, you know, and it becomes very destructive. So I'm sorry, I kept talking too much, so.
No problem. No. Bueno, empezaría con Always Shine. Es una película dirigida por una mujer, pero que la escribió un hombre, su marido, me parece. Va sobre 2 mujeres que son amigas, pero rivales. Las 2 son actrices y tienen mucho resentimiento entre ellas. Y se van a una cabaña, y entonces es donde todos los problemas surgen. Hay otra película que es Queen of Earth, que sí que salió antes, pero salió antes que Always Shine, pero Always Shine se hizo primero. Lo que pasa es que por historias pues salió antes Queen of Earth. Pero me gusta más Always Shine porque es una versión más fuerte sobre cómo trata la relación entre estas 2 mujeres. Es similar, pero es más fuerte la versión de Always Shine, me gusta más. Y después tengo The Stylist. The Stylist es un largometraje que va sobre una peluquera que se siente a gusto con este trabajo porque tiene como una relación superficial con sus clientes, con la gente, porque tiene unos problemas reales cuando se trata de tener una relación más íntima y se vuelve muy destructiva.
And the third one?
The third one, let's see. I should have been thinking that whole time. The third one, oh God, there's a lot. But I don't know. Maybe I don't know. There's too many. I can't pick. But I also really liked Censor, Prano Bailey Bond's movie. It played here last year,
Yeah,
I think.
exactly.
You know, and I feel like she does a really good thing with. She does two things at once, which I really like. You know, one is like she's exploring this idea of female madness. She's exploring this like doing a lot of things like that. Like so many horror films are about grief and loss. You know, like so many horror films begin with someone losing something important to them, like their partner has just died, you know, or they've been evicted or whatever. Something, they've lost something at the beginning of the film, and so they have to navigate this loss at the same time as some kind of horrific thing is happening to them. And in the case of Censor, it's, you know, she's navigating the loss of her sister and feeling of guilt over that, the fact that she can't remember what happened, you know. And so she feels like this. Works as a censor, and so she has this sense of moral responsibility that is very connected to this sense of moral responsibility related to her sister's disappearance. And so I like just the context of the film, that she sets the film in the context of the video nasties panic in the UK. And so there's a lot of just really interesting factual context in the film. And a lot of the aesthetics, you know, 80s aesthetics, you know, of that period and of like VHS and stuff. And so she's kind of bringing all these really interesting things into the film. And so I feel like it really works for a lot of different audiences because she's kind of doing multiple things at once in that film.
That's great, yeah.
Una película que me gustó mucho, una vez más, no he entendido el título.
Censor.
Vale.
Censor de Prano Bailey Bond.
Sí, bueno, de este año pasado. Me gusta mucho porque hace dos cosas a la vez. A la vez de explorar la locura femenina, la pérdida, el sufrimiento, el grief es el duelo, perdón, el duelo, el sufrimiento de perder a alguien importante, de que te haya pasado algo traumático. También a la vez tienen que tratar con este tema con algo terrorífico o alguna presencia maligna. En esta película la protagonista pierde a su hermana y tiene como una responsabilidad moral porque no se acuerda muy bien de qué pasó. Sabe que ha perdido a su hermana, pero no sabe muy bien qué es lo que ocurrió. El contexto está en los años 80, le gusta mucho la estética de los años 80 de esta película, del VHS, del video panic que hubo en esta época en el Reino Unido, y cree que puede llegar a diferentes públicos.
Bueno, dejamos turno abierto de preguntas si tenéis. Yeah, Heidi.
My question's in English.
Oh, great.
I love a lot of the new films that you've added, and especially some of the ones that you've mentioned, like The Stylist and Censor, that are directed by women. But I also love that you've included less well-known films directed by women. I mean, they're well-known to this kind of crowd, but even to this crowd, I think something like Johnny Ghost might be less well-known. And I was just wondering if you could tell the audience a little bit about that film. And
well, Johnny Ghost is not in the film Lost Gully Road.
Oh, sorry, Lost Gully Road.
Which is by the same director.
I confused the director's two films. Anyway. as my brain. But if,
Yeah.
can you sort of tell us what you connected with Donna's film and why you wanted to include that? 'Cause I
Yeah.
think it'd be cool.
Well, Lost Gully Road is a very low-budget, independent Australian film by a filmmaker named Donna McRae. And I mean, for one thing, I just admired that she just decided to go out there and make a film, you know, with like no money and just go out to the woods and make a movie. But she takes a story of a woman going by herself to a cabin in the woods, you know, and there's a story of, you know, some crime she's been involved in, she's hiding out from. But so she's alone in this house, and she is told that she can't use her phone. You know, her sister is like, don't use your phone because the people can trace you, you know. So she's not supposed to be using her phone, but she obviously is so reliant on talking to people on her phone and looking at Facebook and everything that she starts just kind of talking to an invisible person that's in the house. And so it's kind of played out like you don't know whether there is a person, like a ghost in the house, or whether this is just her withdrawal from social media that she's going through. But it ends up getting very dark and violent with this woman alone in the house. And I don't want to give too much away, but it's... I feel the director does a lot with, you know, she does so much with atmosphere, you know, with very little money and resources behind the film. And so it's, it's like one woman, great performance, sound design, everything, like trying to create this atmosphere. And it's just, really impressive.
Vale, le encanta las películas de las que habla, pero Johnny Goes... no he entendido, lo siento. No, hay títulos que me...
Johnny Goes.
Johnny Goes, vale. Entonces, ella habla sobre la película. Es una película australiana de bajo presupuesto, de una chica... O sea, decide irse allí, al bosque, sin nada... perdón.
Solitario.
Sí, a un bosque solitario, ella sola. Se esconde en realidad sobre algún crimen que cometió y entonces su hermana le dice que no utilice el móvil porque la pueden rastrear. La pueden rastrear, entonces mejor que no utilice el móvil. Pero ella se siente tentada por las redes sociales, por el Facebook y todo esto, y se siente tentada y sufre esta tentación. Entonces empieza a hablar con una persona invisible y no sabe si realmente hay un fantasma en la casa o es este mono que tiene de las redes sociales. Es una película muy oscura y violenta, no quiero decir mucho más, pero el ambiente que se crea con tan bajo presupuesto consigue hacer mucho, un personaje grande, una gran actuación y una película muy chula de ver.
¿Alguna pregunta más? ¿Por aquí?
Hola. In English, okay. I just read recently in an interview that you were asked if you had to direct a movie or write a movie, what the subject would it be? And you mentioned to make a movie about or rape and revenge. But even though the subject has been filmed a lot, and I was thinking, how would you approach this? Or will it be that different from this, for example, I Spit on Your Grave saga? How will you approach this sort of subject? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think I remember the interview that you're talking about, and they asked me what kind of film I would make, and I said, like, I'd probably make like this kind of film, like some House of Psychotic Women film or a rape revenge film or something like that. The thing is, I really like rape revenge films. I feel like it's a genre that can be handled very badly. You know, it's easy to handle it badly, and but it's also, you know, easy to make a really thoughtful and impactful rape revenge film because, again, like I said about horror, because it's such an extreme thing, an extreme type of film, you can explore a lot of messy emotions that you might not get to in a like just a normal drama about a sexual assault case, you know. You can like have the vigilante fantasy in it, and I have a very like vindictive nature, so I really like revenge films. Period. And so for me, I think it would be really about the plotting of the revenge and making a very intricate revenge plan, you know, that goes beyond just beating or killing someone. You know, it would be much more long-term ruining their life, you know.
Yeah.
So I feel as though if I made a rape revenge film, that would be the, you know, you can explore all the normal stuff, like the way the justice system does nothing and lets you down, the way that people start to look at you as the problem because you're like the disruptor, because you complained, especially if it's someone from your social circle or something that did this. There's a lot of problems that many women go through, and so all of those things can be addressed, but I think the thing that could be handled differently is the revenge, you know? You can do some really creative things.
Conclusión, no os metáis con ella.
Bueno, le pregunta sobre si le gustaría dirigir o piensa en dirigir una película y que cuál sería el tema para su nueva película, y que lo he visto que veía cómo se lo preguntaban en una entrevista. Ella dice que recuerda la entrevista, que se lo preguntaron, y que sin duda la película que le gustaría hacer sería sobre una venganza de...
Violación y venganza.
Violación de venganza. Dice que... bueno, que realmente haría una película muy extrema de la venganza, porque se considera una persona muy vengativa, y entonces que no se trataría de una película sobre golpear o matar a alguien, sino que iría mucho más allá, hasta arruinarle su vida realmente de una forma muy elaborada, y que haciendo una película sobre este tema puedes explorar mucho más de una simple venganza, porque la manera en que las mujeres muchas veces son tratadas cuando empiezan o cuando comienzan cuando dicen que han sido violadas o han tenido algún problema, son tratadas como ellas, las disruptivas en la sociedad, como si fueran las problemáticas y no el problema real, que es el violador. Se pueden tratar muchos problemas en este tipo de películas, y se pueden tratar de formas muy creativas.
Okay.
The one thing I wanted to say to follow that up, though, is when I did that interview, I had not yet seen the movie Promising Young Woman. Because I feel like Promising Young Woman actually does some of those things where it's like the intricate long-term revenge plan. So I feel like there is a movie kind of like that now, but yeah.
Tengo que decir que cuando me hicieron la entrevista todavía no había visto una película que se llama Promising Young Woman, y que en esta película va sobre precisamente una venganza
a largo
complicada y a largo plazo.
Okay. Bueno, si queréis comprar algún ejemplar, Kier-La os lo vende ella misma. Ya tenéis aquí que los vende tanto en cash como por PayPal. Y dejamos aquí. Muchísimas gracias por vuestra atención.
Thank you.
I want that you sign me.
Oh, yeah.